Hi, this is a lesson in patterns in division with decimal numbers. It goes with Go Math lesson 5.1. And our intention today, the learning intention, is that you can use these powers of 10 patterns in order to place the decimal where it belongs in the quotient after you divide. And what we're going to be doing really is just moving a decimal. And so you just have to figure out which way are we going to be moving the decimal and how many places, and what really tells you how many places to move the decimal. Our success criteria: if you can place the decimal in the quotient correctly and place a decimal when there's a whole number, you're successful. And at the end, you should be able to do similar problems with a 90% accuracy. That way you can show that you've really mastered it. Skills that we need to know what place value is in order to really do well with this. You also have to know what exponents are and powers of 10, and if you're unfamiliar with those terms or with place value, please review them before you continue. Our notes for lesson 5.1: which way should I move the decimal? And I drew this little arrow for you. We're going to be moving the decimal to the left. The number of places to the left depends on what kind of problem that we're looking at. So let's look at a couple of problems. Here is the first set of problems. Sometimes you're going to have a number with a decimal in it, and you're going to be dividing by 10 to some exponent, 10 to the 0 power, 10 to the first power, and 10 to the second power. Fortunately, these are the easiest ones, I think. They look weird, right? They look kind of hard, but they're not, right? Because we're just going to be looking at this part of the number, the exponent. The exponent's going to give us enough information that we can do the problem without looking at just about anything else, because the exponent is the part of the problem that tells you how many places to move the decimal, and we're moving the decimal to the left. We already know that. So in 50.2, if we're dividing by 10 to the 0 power, we look at the exponent 0 and say we're moving the decimal 0 places. So it will stay where it is, right? We're not moving it. So 50.2 divided by 10 to the 0 power is 50.2. Moving on, 50.2 divided by 10 to the first power, if you see a 1, that means I'm going to be moving the decimal one space or one place to the left. So it was in between the 0 and the 2. If I move it one place to the left, it's going to be between the 5 and the 0. So 5.02. You can see that it has the same digits, right? 502, 502. But the decimal is moved over one place to the left because we're dividing by 10 with an exponent of 1. The last problem in this set is an exponent of 2, right? So I'm going to be moving the decimal 2 spaces to the left. Oop, I didn't mean to make that mark, but it's okay. 1 space and then 2 spaces. And so now the decimal is before the 5 in the number, and 0.502. A lot of people say, well, that looks wrong. The decimal is supposed to be, separating the whole numbers and the parts of the numbers, or the decimal places. So if you want to put a 0 on there, that's fine. If you don't want to put it on there, it's okay too. All right, moving on now. If you don't have exponents in the numbers, how many spaces do you move it? Well, fortunately, there's another pattern here. If there's 1 or 2 zeros, or 3 or 4, however many zeros, that's how many places you move the decimal. So in the first one, I see 0 zeros, and so 32.6 divided by 1 is 32.6. Now, really, you should know anything divided by 1 is the number you started with. But what do I do when I divide by 10? A lot of people are going to be like setting up the problem. Okay, 32.6 divided by 10, but really that's not necessary. It's just a pattern. The number of zeros you have equals the number of decimal places you're going to be moving it. So I see 1 0. I'm going to be moving it one place to the left. And so the decimal was between the 2 and the 6, and now it's going to be between the 3 and the 2 when I write my answer. I can even write 326 and then just place the decimal in between there if I wanted to. That's an acceptable way of doing it. But you notice, same digits, decimals moved over one space because there's 1 0. In our last example here, you have 2 zeros, which means I'm going to be moving the decimal 2 places. So take your decimal and move it over one space, 2 spaces, and now it is before the 3. 326 decimals there, and you can sneak your 0 in there if you have room. All right, in our last example, we have a whole number. And people freak out when they see the whole number and they're moving the decimal because they say, well, there's no decimal there. What do I do? Where do I put it? And the teacher says, well, put it in the right spot. Put it at the end. And people say, at this end or at that end? Well, this one should be a no-brainer, but it's still confusing people. Let's start with this place value right here. What place value is that? Good, it's the ones place. Yeah. Now, if I put the decimal over on this end of the number, that's not the ones place anymore, right? The ones place is over here on the other side of the decimal. So I can't place it over here. That turns it into the thousandth place. So if I'm going to add a decimal, I add it on the end, but I add it right next to the ones place so that the ones place is still the ones place. And then I still follow the patterns, right? So I have to add my decimal when there's a whole number and there's no decimal, I have to add it on there. But the same pattern goes. If I have a 0 or a 1 or a 2 or even a 3 as my exponent, that tells me how many places to move the decimal. And I'm going to be moving it to the left. So in the first one, it's an exponent of 0. I will move it 0 places. It was at the end, and there it shall stay. A lot of people will say, well, you don't need the decimal, and you really don't. I'm just drawing it there so that you can see that's kind of where it goes without moving it. All right, the next one in this example is an exponent of 1. That means I'm going to be moving the decimal one place. I got to add the decimal first, then move it over one spot, and it's going to be between the 2 and the 3 now. So it goes 42.3. Next one is an exponent of 2. I have to add my decimal on there, then move it over one space, 2 spaces, and now it's between the 4 and the 2. So it makes it 4.23. And then the last example, the exponent is a 3. I add my decimal on there, move it over one place, 2 places, 3 places, and drop the decimal there. So it becomes 0.423. And then many of you are going to be adding the 0 on there. I always add the 0 just because it looks better. All right, here's our common mistakes. People see 10 to the 0 power as 0, so they might see something like 3.2 times 10 to the 0 power and say, oh, anything times 0 is 0, so that the answer is 0. That's wrong. It is not equal 0. 10 to the 0 power equals 1. And then the 10 to the first power does not equal 1. The exponent tells you that's 1/10, so that equals 10. Our task today is that you can do 10 problems from lesson 5.1. You can do them with a 90% accuracy to show that, hey, you've mastered it. Good luck.